Downtown Decatur, it's the Faber Files. Hello, I'm your host, Bill Faber. Because democracy demands debate, we present this program, a program of community issues, events, and interests, seen and heard nowhere else on broadcast TV, radio, or newspaper. Tonight's presentation is the graduation of the men's fraternity in Decatur. The speaker is a nationally known author and speaker, Sid Woodruff, and he'll be speaking to the graduation class. It presents a 3-year study program. The first year is entitled The Quest for Authentic Manhood. The second year is Winning at Work and Home. And the third year course of study is The Great Adventure. The men's fraternity has been taught since 1990 and is currently being taught in over 17,000 locations worldwide. In Decatur, this is the second year as a citywide event and the third year for one of the participants, Tom Gensler, who taught the class here in the Decatur area. The men's fraternity is an umbrella ministry of a larger men's ministry called the Relevant Practical Ministry for Men. It's an interesting program and a perspective on life, moral, and ethics. Let's join together and watch the graduation ceremony. Thanks for watching.
Well, this is an awesome group. I never get tired of being a part of these manhood ceremonies, and I've had the opportunity to be a part of them in a lot of different parts of the country. And what you don't understand this morning is that you're a part of a vast army that is marching forward into a battle. And the battle that we're marching forward to is a battle that is not going to be won with a part-time army and half-hearted effort. And so what happens here is that you're holding down your sector of this part of the world, but you're not alone. You're part of a bigger army that is marching and moving forward. You know, whenever I stand up to speak before a group, oftentimes it's in various parts of the country, and so I always have to explain to people that I was born and raised in Texas, and I moved to Tennessee. Now, I got to tell you, that's a pretty easy move because you don't have to learn how to talk any faster. But, you know, whenever they hear that you're from Texas, you know, Texans are noted for being braggarts, and it reminds me of the Texan who was in Ireland, and he was touring the countryside kind of on his own. He ventured out there, and as he's looking out over into this field, he sees this Irishman hoeing his potatoes, and he asked, thought he'd have a little fun with the guy, so he said, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" He said, "Well, I'm hoeing my potatoes." The Texan said, "Can I see one of them?" And the Irishman holds it up, and he holds up this really fine prize potato, and the Texan says, "Why, do you call that a potato? Why, in Texas, we grow our potatoes this big." And the Irishman said, "Yes, but in Ireland, we grow them to fit our mouths." So, when you're a Texan, you have to be really careful because it can kind of all backfire on you, somehow. I wanted to say to you this morning that one of the things that I did in Men's Fraternity 2 is that I've continued tweaking that plan. This year you went through 10 key moves, and 10 key moves are great. They're the right things that you're supposed to do that will make a tremendous difference, not only in your life now, but in generations to come if you follow through on those 10 key moves. But they need to be updated. You remember when it talked about dating your wife weekly, those weekly connectors that you have with your wife, and then it said, have those quarterly memory makers that you have with your wife where you get away and you spend some time talking about your goals, talking about your 10 key moves and how you're progressing on those so you have that built-in accountability. And then we talked about those yearly extravaganzas that are those things that in years to come you'll look back on and you'll say, here was a mile marker, here was something significant that happened into my life. I kind of want to share one of those events that I have yearly. There's a group of people that I get together with, a group of couples. There are 5 different couples that we go with, and a couple of years ago we decided what we were going to do as a group of guys is to make sure that we made Valentine's a special deal. What we were going to do is every year we were going to get together as a group of guys and we were going to plan a group outing. Well, the first year we stepped up and we took it, and we talked with our wives and we said, you know, Valentine's is a two-way thing, right? I mean, why is it, guys, that we're responsible for getting the candy and the cards, right? So, you know, your wife loves you, she cares about you, but we just said what we're going to do to make this unique is the first year what we're going to do is we're going to plan the event. Then the next year, the ladies plan the event, and it's a surprise. They keep it a secret from one another. So the first year, what we did, we took them out to this really nice Chinese restaurant that we knew most all of them had eaten at before, but it's not the kind of place that you would go every day or every week even. It's kind of, you know, kind of top shelf, a little bit above. So we took them to this Chinese restaurant. They didn't know it was coming, but it was a great time. We'd made some advanced preparations and arrangements to be there. And it's always really crowded, but it was really a great dinner. And then after that, what we did is we took them ice skating. Now, you know, do I look like an ice skater? I'm not much of an ice skater, but I have skated. I've probably roller skated more than I ice skated. And so, you know, when I skate around the rink, I kind of stay close to the rail. You know what I mean? So, you know, so we took them ice skating. It was a really nice date. Everybody had a great time together. You know, I'd gone out and bought some flowers and some candy and a card, and each guy had done something special on his own that he surprised his wife with when they came home from the day. But it was something, a way to hold ourselves accountable. And then this last year, what the women did was they took us to Five Guys hamburgers, okay? All right, a burger and fries. Don't give me, you know, this girly stuff. Give me some meat and potatoes. And so we went out there, you know, we had this real man meal. And then after that, they took us another thing involving ice skating, except we went to a hockey game, okay? You know, something really rough. You know, by the way, you know, I'm sitting there and the referees, it's between the Predators and the Coyotes. And of course, right now they're in third and fourth place in the Western Division. So they're already in the playoffs if they can kind of hold on, you know, as they continue through it. But the refs kept breaking up the fights. I mean, they wouldn't let them kind of drop the gloves and go at it. They were really watching the game very closely, and everybody around me was booing at the refs because they wouldn't let the guys fight, okay? You know, interesting thing about hockey, I found this out, that in 1874, the first testicular guard, the cup, was introduced in hockey and was worn as a piece of equipment in hockey, 1874. In 1974, the helmet became an official part of the hockey uniform, which it means it only took 100 years for men who play hockey to figure out their brains are also important. You know, one of the things that becoming an authentic man involves is it involves a battle. I mean, have you sensed this? I mean, it's a real struggle. It's something that we all have in common with one another. And when we begin talking about stepping up to a higher, more noble, authentic manhood, we realize that we're going to have to fight if we're going to go there. And you guys broke the finish line today. Listen, you should congratulate yourself. You have done something significant because you have said, I'm not willing just to kind of let life come at me. I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to move forward. And that's going to cause you to have some great rewards because you had to die a little bit to yourself in some of those areas of your life. Because you know what? We found out that guys, if we guess at it, generally, what do? We guess wrong, right? So we have to work at it in order to train ourselves to move in a new direction. There's a passage of Scripture where the Bible tells us, and Paul is speaking, and he says, you know, if you're going to fight this fight, take on the full armor of God. And as a part of that armor, what he says is, and take up what? The sword. Take up the sword. The sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. He's writing to Timothy in one place, and when he's writing to Timothy, he says to him in 1 Timothy 1:18, he says this, Timothy, I'm saying these things to you. I'm giving you these instructions, and the reason why I'm giving you these instructions is so that you may strongly engage in battle. He says, take up this sword that's a part of the uniform. Now, I want you to know that every man who aspires to authentic manhood must learn to be able to use his sword. And I want to teach you this morning real quickly 3 moves with the sword. I want to talk to you real quickly about the inward thrust of the sword. I want to talk to you about the forward thrust of the sword. And then I want to talk to you about the upward thrust of the sword this morning. 3 key things every man who aspires to authentic manhood must remember if he is going to be that guy that makes a difference in the lives of his family and breathes life into all the people who are around him. First of all, there is the inward thrust of the sword. That verse that was quoted this morning, repeated over and over again by every man who is here, says, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow Jesus. The inward thrust of the sword, of course, stands for the fact that there's something within us that we must slay, something that must die, something that must be killed if we're really going to become all that we were made to become. This inward thrust of the sword, first of all, of course, has to attack this passivity that every man battles. It's a passivity that we face, and this passivity is a malignancy that has corrupted and impacted every man's life. And who do we owe this to? We go all the way back to Adam, and you remember in the quest for authentic manhood, we looked at authentic manhood and we saw that there were the failures of the first Adam that have been passed on through the generations. And that real authentic manhood is determined by whose shadow are you going to live your life in? Are you going to live your life in the shadow of the first Adam, or are you going to live your life in the shadow of the second Adam, Jesus Christ? And we found out, that the first Adam was a passive male. He was a classic passive male. Because what happened is that Adam in the Garden of Eden, instead of stopping Eve from eating that fruit, which he already knew she was not supposed to eat from, he just kind of stood back and let her take the hit on her own. There's this passivity that we fight within ourselves. When my daughter was 14 years old, I made a decision to spend 30 days with her in a row where we went through a notebook. It was a notebook called the 30 Days. And in those 30 days, in this notebook, there were 30 sealed envelopes. And you might want to try this, by the way. It's by Ross and Reyes. It's called the 30 Days, and it's 30 sealed envelopes. But you open up this blue notebook, and you don't open up the envelope until you're with your daughter. But what I did was I said, listen, I want to make a date with you. I want to meet with you for 30 days in a row. And we had a little room in our house where we could get away from, and I'd gone up there, and I had set up some candles there. And just my daughter and I were going to visit. And I don't know, guys, you may be affectionate. You may feel like you're really close and connected to your daughters. But for me, it was kind of terrifying when I got alone with my daughter, because I began to realize that even though I had shown her affection, even though I'd oftentimes told her that I loved her, every day I had told her that I loved her, I realized that when we sat down face to face that I really hadn't talked to her about some of the deeper things of life, and that I wanted to spend some time where she knew me as her dad, but that we connected as friends. She's 14 years old. We go up into this room, and day by day, you open the envelope, and there's something for the dad to say, and you talk about a little bit about when you were 14 years of age, and then it says, tell us what some of your fears are that you're 14 years of age right now. What are some of these going on? And there's nothing magical about the fact that it's 14. You can do it when they're 15 or 16, but it works best, I found, if you do this with your daughter when she's in those early teen years before she begins dating. So we're going through this, and as we're going through it day by day, there are different things we're doing, and we come to like day 21, 22, something like that, and I open it up and I cut the envelope, and at the part of that session, it's talking about her future mate and what she wants to find in a mate, and you ask her those questions, and she tells you things that she's thinking about, and then it says, Dad, get up out of your seat and go over and place a chair in the middle of the room and place your hands on that chair and imagine that your daughter's future husband is seated in that chair. Now say a prayer out loud for your daughter's future husband. Man, I was laying it on thick. Okay, I wanted him to be sexually pure. I wanted him to be a believer. I wanted him to come from a home, where Christ was known and recognized and loved and appreciated. And I wanted them to be able to share the same church and spiritual life together. And so I'm praying these things out loud. Later on, when my daughter began dating, I remember one particular guy that she had been dating, and she was very discerning. But, like all girls, they want to know, am I pretty? Does anybody love me? Listen, if you as a man don't give that to your daughter, she will go off searching for it from other people, but she must hear it from her father. And so I would tell her how beautiful she was and how wonderfully she was created. And she even told my wife one time when she asked about someone who had asked her out, and my daughter said this, she said, "No, I don't think he's the kind of man Dad would want me to marry." On July 24th, this past year, I stood in a church, and my daughter with her future husband, she's 22, 23 years old right now. She just got married this last summer, and I looked up, and you know what I did, guys? In the wedding ceremony, I pulled out day 22 from that journal from when she was 14 years of age. And I read from that sheet some of the things that I remembered she had told me that she was looking for in a future husband, and how I had prayed over that chair for her future mate. And I announced to her and the congregation, that which is faith has become sight. And here standing before us today is Jason, who is the answer to our prayers. You see, guys, one of the things we have to do is we have to reject passivity. There's the inward thrust of the sword, but there's also the forward thrust of the sword, going forward into battle. The forward thrust of the sword. And one of the things about the forward thrust of the sword is that it is there because we have to conquer the strongholds that are in our lives. All men have baggage. And one of the things in men's fraternity that has been so helpful to me and to hundreds of thousands of other men, not just in the United States, but around the world, and I'm talking about China and South America, where there are men's fraternity groups meeting, even today, who are going through ceremonies similar to the ones that we have had here in different cultures. You know why that is? You know why this works in other cultures as well as in the United States? Because there is a common manhood language that is spoken. And in this common manhood language that is spoken, we find out that we all carry a suitcase. Do you remember this from the Quest for Authentic Manhood? That one of the promises was that you would open up your suitcase and you would unpack your suitcase, all that stuff you've been carrying around inside of you. And some of those were things like wounds that you had developed, a father wound because your father may not have loved you or affirmed you, or you've been spending all of your life trying to live up to some expectation. The overly committed or involved mother who, you know, you're still kind of tied to your mother, and there's that kind of wound where you just can't break away. And then there's also this wound called the all-alone wound. I don't know if you remember that one or not. The all-alone wound is where you've been taught that you need to, if you're going to make it, you need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. I'm a man. I don't need anybody else. I got it together. I can do it. We all suffer from the all-alone wound. And I don't know if you remember this scene from the movie Gladiator. Let me just, before I even tell this story, ask, how many of you are familiar with the movie Gladiator? Would you raise your hand so I can see? The gladiators are put out there for sport. In this particular sporting event that's cast before everybody. Do you remember the scene, those of you who saw the movie? The scene is you've got this kind of ragtag army of guys who've been trained as gladiators who are put out in there, and they're restaging the Battle of Carthage, which the Romans won, which, by the way, does not sound good for the gladiators who are out there, because coming out of the chutes are wild animals and guys in chariots who are there to slaughter the gladiators as sport before the people who are watching. Maximus Decimus Meridius says, any of you guys fight in the army? Any of you have experience? Nobody there knows he's a Roman general. But when they get out there, he says, follow my lead and stick with me. And we'll form our ranks in a certain way so that they can't penetrate us with the chariots. Every now and again, you'll see one of the gladiators break off on his own. And every time any one of the gladiators breaks away from the group, what happens is he's killed. Now, guys, that's a great story for us. It's a great story because when you put forth the sword, when you go with the forward thrust of the sword, you've got to recognize that you can't climb the mountain of manhood disconnected from other men. That's why next year, in year 3, as you have knelt down here and you have made a commitment, it's not only to be here, but it's to make sure that you bring another man along with you in that 3rd year as you go on in men's fraternity. By the way, can I say something to you? You get the entire men's fraternity message in year 1. It's just one message. But in year 2, what happens is we go a little bit deeper into things that were just kind of broad brushed for us in year 1. And in year 3, what's going to happen is you're going to cast a dream, cast a vision. And as you put forth this sword, as you go with the forward thrust in year 3, one of the things that you're going to do is not only are you going to conquer some of those things that have held you back in your life, but what you're going to do is you're going to get a vision for your life. Well, I said there are 3 things that a man needs to know. If he wants to be an authentic man, 3 things he needs to know. He needs to do the inward thrust of the sword. He needs to have the forward thrust of the sword. But he also needs to have the upward thrust of the sword. And the upward thrust of the sword represents celebration. That's what we've come here this morning to do, to celebrate the fact that we've said, it's not enough for me to stay as I am. I want to do more. I want there to be more to my life than what there has been. You know, in here there are some men who are celebrating the fact that you have become connected to another man. A group of men in your discussion time after each session where you spend some time together. I want to ask you to do something as you celebrate. You know, it has been said that when a man shares his burdens with another man, the burden is half. And when he shares his joys and his victories and his celebrations with another man, the joy is doubled. And so here today, what I want you to do is I want you to exchange phone numbers with another man. And from this point forward, at least once a week, to call that other man. Don't leave, but get connected to another man where you call one another once a week and check up on each other on how you're doing on your 10 key moves. Next year, when you get ready and you remember this feeling of exhilaration when you won at home with your wife and with your children, and you remember that you want somebody else to experience this same thing. Remember that we are in a battle. And we're going to celebrate together. I want to end by telling you a story about a man. It's a true story. And the true story is about a man named Bill Havens. Bill Havens in 1924, the New York Times predicted in 1924 that Bill Havens would win 4 gold medals in the Paris Olympics, competing for the United States in sculling. That's an oarsman. 4 gold medals. He was selected to the U.S. Olympic team. He had trained hard. He was at the height, peak of his performance level. But as the Olympics grew closer, his wife was pregnant, and he began calculating. After all these months and years of training, he began calculating and playing it out. 1924 now, and realized that there was a good probability, not just possibility, but a probability that his wife would have their first child while he was away at the Olympic Games. So Bill Havens did something unthinkable. He made a hard decision. Because you see, in 1924, you don't get to Paris, France by jumping on an airplane and then get home, in a matter of hours. They traveled by boat as a team. It was a transatlantic trip that they took. And so, there's a week of getting ready and going over and making the trip and settling in, and then, you get acclimated to the climate for several days before the actual events begin. And then the Olympic Games are 3 weeks in length, and then you've got another week, and coming back and re-entering and getting back with your home and your family. So you're looking at 5 or 6 weeks that these athletes would be gone. So Bill Havens went to the USOC, and he told them that his wife was expecting a child, their first child, and that he had made a decision that rather than compete in the Olympic Games, he was going to stay home for the birth of their child, who, by the way, was a son. Now, I wish this was one of those television movies where in 30 minutes or an hour it all ties up real nicely, and in the end we all hear that Bill Havens competes again and he wins those gold medals that he missed out in 1924. But I want to say something to you. Bill Havens was at the peak of his performance in 1924. He never competed for the United States Olympic team and never won a medal. But 28 years later, in 1952, he received a telegram The telegram was from Helsinki, Finland, the location of the 1952 Olympic Games. Bill Havens began reading the telegram. It was short. This is what it said. Dear Dad, thank you for staying home for my birth. I'm bringing home the gold medal you should have won. Love, your son. Now, guys, I want to tell you something this morning. That's what it means to celebrate. We lift the sword in celebration because, you see, the fact is, not every time that we do something are people going to cheer for us at the moment that we do them. But there are rewards to doing the right thing. I salute you this morning for your completion. But this is not the end of the journey. This is the beginning of a journey. It's a journey that requires us as men, like was said a while ago, to continue doing those stomach crunches. You can tell I'm one who probably needs to do some of those, by the way. But you don't get those six-pack abs, by just sitting around and wishing for them. You have to work for them. And you have to stay in shape. I want to thank you for allowing me to come and share this highlight, this moment with you this morning. It's special. And I just want to say to you again, you're a part of a larger army that is marching forward, a mighty army that is making a difference in this world, and it's making a difference. One family, one man, one child, one business place at a time. God bless you, and thank you. Tom?
All right, we're here with Tom Gensler with Men's Fraternity. We just got done with the graduation ceremony, and want to allow Tom to say a little bit about the fraternity and what it is.
Yes, Men's Fraternity is a 3-year curriculum that actually started in Little Rock, Arkansas by a prompting of a pastor named Dr. Robert Lewis at Fellowship Bible Church, and his men were just kind of asking, what is there out there? What's more than just a regular Bible study? And it was from that Robert kind of put together Men's Fraternity 1, and then through that a series of Men's Fraternity 2 and 3 developed, just really tackling a lot of manhood plans, a lot of manhood struggles and things that we deal with in life as Christian men, as husbands, as fathers, as co-workers. And Men's Fraternity is currently, I think, at over 17,000 locations worldwide, because it deeply resonates with men and kind of speaks to their soul. Is that man food that when a man hears it, he desires he desires what he's hearing and teaching. Because I think we go into life and we quickly find out that we're ill-equipped, and Robert Lewis just kind of puts us on a tool belt and gives us things that we're able to head into life with as Christian men to have successes as Christ followers, husbands, and parents with our children.